Hi, everyone. I'm Ami Dang, and I'm a musician. I'm based in Baltimore in the United States. And I play the sitar, and I sing, and I produce music with electronics. Thanks so much for joining us today at DICE, Orbital Entities Volume 2. I'm really excited to be here with you all. I want to just talk a little bit first about DICE. It's a Berlin-based music conference and festival that works to create more equitable spaces and practices within the music industry. And the theme of this 2021 DICE edition is orbital entities. As a theme, it aims to explore how individuals, networks of people, and existing structures in the music landscape and society at large have maintained connection, cohesion, and community, and at what cost, while adapting to uncertainty and the ever-changing, these often potentially permanent new conditions. So the 2021 edition of the festival takes place entirely online on the 30th and 31st of October this year, so coming up very soon. And there's a full program including workshops, talks, performances, and DJ sets. You can find that full program and register for the events, which is free. And that can be found on our website at https://dice.berlin/orbital entities. So again, that's dice.berlin/orbital entities. And I also wanted to give a little bit of some background on my role with these talks. As I mentioned, I'm based here in Baltimore in the US, but a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, I had an amazing experience, the wonderful opportunity to perform at DICE Festival and Conference in Berlin. I was so fortunate to be able to attend the full scope of the conference and was so excited about everything the conversations that were coming up at DICE. So, as I mentioned, this year's program is fully online. Last year's program was largely also remote. But in talking with DICE more, we realized that there's this amazing opportunity to engage in these conversations with a broader community of artists around the world. And so my series of talks aims to engage with artists who are thinking about all these questions and all these issues, but in many different places. And so today I'm really excited to talk to artist, sound artist, composer, visual artist, painter, Elisita Elisita Punto, also known as Futuro Fossil. And Elisita, I like to ask people to describe themselves and their work a little bit. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, thanks for having me today in this beautiful festival conference and getting ready for the festival. Well, my name is Elisita. My dad name is Balbontin, but everybody knows me by Punto since I was born. And Futuro Fossil is my music, aka Futuro Fossil performative persona these days. Beforehand, I participated in a band called Macaroni for many years, but as today, Futuro Fossil is moving around on what we are fossilizing, what's coming next of ourselves how are we gonna become rocks or what are we gonna become for the future? But let me tell you a little bit about myself. I live in Chile, in the city of Valdivia. That's in the south of Chile, surrounded by beautiful rainforests and rivers, and like an hour away from plenty of volcanoes. And Valdivia is next to the Pacific Ocean, and it's a very small town, I would say. But I love being close to nature and having access to be sporing with spores, with mushroom spores and all kinds
Yes.
of beings and outdoor activities. Before that, I lived in New York for about 10 years. I lived in Santiago, Chile. And I, besides music, I'm a muralist. I paint murals, big scale projects. Also like basketball courts and all sort of. I love painting big scale things, which of course takes a little bit of designing in smaller dimensions. But so I go from music to painting, and I think both. I'm trying to put together these two aspects of my life, and both are very performative, and that's how they join, and how music talks to visual arts and and I see art as a way of composing music too. So that's like a deeper research in life, how these both things talk to each other.
Yeah, it's such an interesting theme that I think weaves its way through your work, whether it's through sound, and as you mentioned, through your murals. I think you also have created collections of graphic scores, which is such a beautiful and interesting way to combine art, visual art, I should say, or visual media and music, but also integrating, I think, aspects of nature. What is some of the latest projects that you're working on these days?
This year I've been focused in a exhibition, working for the sound of a exhibition that will happen next February in London in the Welcome collection. And it already had a first season in Madrid in Casa Encendida, and it's a collaboration with a Chilean artist. She's a video artist and installation and also painter, but she has we've been collaborating for many years, but as this year we're working on how plants, like trying to get the frequencies of plants and how these plants will communicate, but we made it from channelizing these plants and getting different sounds. So the hardest part of this project, which is the first time I'm doing it, is a quad piece. It's like sound
The
coming for
quad sound.
quad sound, and it's been more challenging than I thought. I thought it was gonna be easier, but it's that's been like taking all my music sort of new discovery this year. And
Yeah.
besides like pandemic timing and all of that, I'm starting to like my first show will come in December 1st. I will start playing live again, which is something I'm looking forward.
Yeah. When you say with this Encuentro Vegetal piece, you were saying like channeling the sounds from plants. Are you using field recordings or are you deriving sounds in different ways? Can you tell us about the process a little bit?
In this case, it's been a mix of field recordings and also sort of trying to recognize a sound for each plant. In this case, we worked with cinchona, with ayahuasca, and with a floripondio, which are psychedelic plants used either for medicine or for other like hallucinogenic, hallucinogenic and shamanism.
Hmm.
So there are like very strong plants. None of them I've tried myself yet. Um, so we were trying to discover how would these plants, what language would they use, if there's wood or wind, or what kind of texture or the rhythm of their
Mm.
uh, communication, sort of. So it's a very subtle work. So we did a lot of meditation processes through these plants. The artist which I work with, Patricia Dominguez, she works doing canalization of people, of things, of objects. Of I mean, that's the main sort of inspiration of her work. So from there on, she taught me some of these techniques, and we did a series of canalization processes in order to get to the sound. And then some of them were like interpretations of playing little sticks and shakers and trying to get in the mood of each plant. And all of these were plants that existed in Latin America that were taken and overused in other countries and exploited. And
Oh,
now there are some of them in extinction, some not. But part of the exhibition has to be with bringing up these plants again and recognizing them and offering them and putting them back in history.
wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, sort of how did you choose which plants and was there intention behind that, but I think you mentioned so they were. I think you said they're native to Chile, but had been um, kind of exploited in different ways. So did you spend a lot of time also researching the history behind the plants?
I mean, they were native of Latin America, none of them
Mm-hmm.
from Chile specifically. They're from Colombia, Peru, the Andes. I think the Andes
Yeah.
would be like the geographical region. In
Right.
this case, Patricia, she invited me to work specifically with these plants because
Mm-hmm.
this is part of a major exhibition, which has to do. She was invited to a residency in the Wellcome Collection in London to work with old books of the first discoverers that came to Latin America, and they drew these plants and they sort of took some knowledge from the indigenous people here and brought them back to Europe. So she had the opportunity to work directly with this source, which
Mm-hmm.
the drawings of these books, and um, these are 500-year-old books or more,
Wow. Wow.
so it's coming from their sort of the work, also learning from that experience, from direct sources. And the exhibition will be about that, seeing these
Wow.
books and also seeing images of these plants nowadays, the history of each of them, and an artistic interpretation of them. So the music builds an atmosphere of how to get into this plant experience in a way of, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. I know you had some work you were also just working on recently that you were thinking about sharing. Do you want to share that, or
I
and
can
maybe tell us a little bit about this piece, or
I
sort
can
of?
show you a little bit.
Yeah.
This is something I worked last night in this process. It's something for this exhibition. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not yet. It's in the process of
Cool.
like doing things, and sometimes we like some of the things we do, and sometimes they just forgotten, or maybe it's going to be used in something else for a movie or for something else. I don't know. In 2 years from now, it also happens. I have like a
Yeah.
folder of projects that you don't know, but let me
Oh
show you.
yeah.
We can play it in the background while we talk, and it's sounding. Can you hear it?
I can hear it. I think we'll listen for a minute and then we'll talk a little bit more.
Okay.
Amazing. It's such an interesting process, I think. I mean, you and I have talked about this in the past, just this notion of interacting with nature, and that you're someone who just enjoys being in nature all the time, I think, and taking inspiration from it, but also really like manifesting, taking that, your relationship with nature, and manifesting it in art and in music. And I say, I mean, art in the general sense, whatever
Yeah.
medium that takes. Yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off also because you want to talk about the piece. Feel free.
No, no, go ahead. I wonder what your experience with the piece. I mean, like,
Oh, yeah, no, I love it. It's interesting how, I mean, I think a lot of times we think about landscape and nature around us and it's just sort of ambient and it's there. And I like how the piece reflects that in the sort of elements that are looping. But then there's those gestural kind of puncture, the sounds that puncture the space is, to me, it reminds me that nature is evolving and it's moving and I mean in particular plants or that they're active. And I think unfortunately something that happens nowadays in our modern contemporary world is that so many people are so out of touch with nature and it's just something that is very much in the background. um, and yeah, so I appreciate that attention to detail, but and also like I don't know, for me the piece also kind of brought out um the juxtaposition between what we can kind of think of as like a broader landscape, but also those kind of punctuated elements are like, nature is like moving and happening and changing all around us.
mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nice appreciation. I
Yeah.
love it. Well, it has to do with organics of it. Like, let's say it would be easy to make a MIDI piece and have everything synced or to a grid or anything. But one of the exercises of this piece has to do with playing it live, like arpeggiators or any of the sounds that are sort of coming and, pulsing in and out. That's one of the exercises. So it has to do with getting, like, listening to nature. So then to play music in that kind of state or uh, peace moment, which necessarily hasn't to be peace. Sometimes even playing nature things, you can get really annoying or like loud sounds that come out of it too when doing that work. Sometimes I go to the forest and I get like even scared or like agitated by certain things, and then that then becomes music, and people think, oh, nature will always be beautiful music, and sometimes it's like scary stuff, like how
Yeah.
in that process between the studio and going out on the field. But I like that of things that pop in and out, and that's how, I mean, every gesture that happens in the forest or within life will change everything in the future too. So
Mm.
those are these spores or gestures or things that just come in and out. I don't know. It's very subtle
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's in the thought of it, at least.
Yeah. No, you brought up that's really interesting to think about that too. In nature, it's something any gesture or movement or spore or seed can create a whole can it takes its own trajectory. Um, and yeah, I wish I could go when the I think my internet is a little bit bad, but hopefully I was just saying that I wish I could come to see the show or that maybe it'll make its way to the United States sometime and I can go. But yeah, I'm curious to hear too how you said you're struggling with trying to put this sound into a quadraphonic piece. Did you have a certain goal that you were trying to achieve with regards to the quad sound? Like, are there certain sounds that you wanted to move in a certain way, or you just kind of were approaching it maybe more in a more open way, or share if you don't mind sharing a little bit of that process too, that'd be
Mm,
helpful.
I mean, the starting point of wanting to do a quad piece has to do
Hmm.
with the way con- of understanding music, how it's played in different places. I mean, sometimes we have this stage thing with a stereo exhibition, like it's a L and a R, and you have the musician in front of you, and everything comes from one side, from like your left and right
Right.
side. But then regarding to shamanism and to ceremonies and to the places where these plants were taken from, usually
Yeah.
like ceremonies and things, like music comes from everywhere. It's not, you don't have one person playing you. It's like everyone in the ceremony is performing, or there's more performance, and you are involved in it. You are in the middle, you are part of it. So has to do with music or sound coming from all directions. So it's like breaking the idea that everything comes from left and right. It's so you have
Mhm.
like left, right, front, back. It's playing a 5.1. I mean, in cinema, it happens all the time. That cinema tries to imitate the sound of real life. And you go to
Mhm.
this beautiful surround system uh, places, to hear beautiful compositions and like productions. But in music, it's haven't been like too much explored. I mean, Susan Ciani does it beautifully, and she's a big
Mhm.
inspiration, and many others, I guess, in acoustic engineering have worked with it. But I'm trying it, for the first time. But coming from that conceptual
Yeah.
thing, and then yeah, the elements, I'm playing with it, with like the idea of how they can travel in space from one speaker to the other, or how they make a bigger ambience too. And also it has to be very subtle, because it's not that the sound is the main thing of the exhibition. It's more about the plants and other aspects, but they carry you somehow too in the experience of the show. you know I would love to
Yeah.
try it live now, like how to
Right.
do quiet performances live. That's like, I think, the next thing I would like to explore. But yeah, it takes time, and not all the places are prepared for that, so it requires some technical things to resolve, and beautifully to explore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons in my experience, it's so much not it's not an avenue or an area that's been explored so much by so many musicians because of the technical difficulties and obviously, I mean, it's one thing to I think so many people have the curiosity and aptitude to learn it, but then with venues and setting up a space, just being able to actually have a space where they're able to have 4 channels and or 4 or more even. I know artists who do diffusion works for 8 octaphonic systems for 8 channels, but that's so rare to be able to set that up somewhere.
Mm.
And it's unfortunate, but I feel like there's, like you said too, with movies now, 5.1 surround sound is so normal, and we go into those theaters. I like, it's funny too, because I was like, oh wait, why don't we have more sound works in movie halls, in movie cinemas? Like that would be such a really interesting use of maybe like some independent cinema would want to have some sound artists and composers make interesting surround pieces, and why not? you know, and maybe that's happening somewhere, but I know in my community, I don't think it's happening so much. Maybe a little bit, but yeah, that's I don't know. I just was thinking about that. That's not
Yeah.
really a question.
In my community, I feel like it's happening very little, or starting to
Yeah.
happen. But also, when, let's say, I'm asked to do sound for a movie, like a movie score or something, which I've worked on, it's always like you deliver a stereo piece, but the sound is going to be played in a 5.1 piece. And then who does the sound design is like, yes, a person who have the studio to do it, and they just, I mean, play around with it. But if we learn how to do music for those sound systems, will be different, because then you're preparing yourself for a 5.1, or, I mean,
Right.
and I guess it's about this. We have the sources to do it, and then I know Appleton Live now has like new VSTs, and I guess it has to be like a lot of research and to get more into it, and discovering and doing more connections with sound designers, and let's do it. It's like,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, well, and something else I was thinking about too is now with the, virtual reality and augmented reality and like 360, there's more like headphones and things that can use ambisonic sound. So I hope it's really exciting to me that you're starting to get into it, and it's something I've also been thinking about, but have not personally like really gone there. I started sort of exploring, like I downloaded a plugin that I started to try and play around with, but I was like, I don't have time. I just like didn't end up going anywhere with it. But at some point, I'd really like to. Also because of, with like video game, with the AR and VR, people who are interested in playing video games like that. technology exists now for us to
Mhm.
experience so much in 360. So it's really exciting. I think, I think pretty soon we're going to see so much more of this because the technology is catching up so much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah. Well, I also
Okay.
wanted to, so I noticed we have a few questions. Normally I wait until the end to do the question and answer, but there's a question somebody posed about working with the sounds of plants and its sounds of nature and sort of non-musical sounds. So I'm gonna, since we were talking about that, I'm gonna bring that back in. So
Mhm.
somebody asks, how is the process of making music out of something that is not musical, such as plants? And how do you know it's finished? How do you decide that it's done or that it's not, that it's like the correct sound?
Okay. It's never finished, and that's one
Yeah.
of the hardest thing. And for this piece exactly, it's like
Yeah.
the process of never finishing it. Your ears change while you grow in it too. So
Yeah.
it has to be finished when you have to show it, and to the point you're showing it. And sometimes you're really not secure about it, but it's in the process of organicity, of like it will ever continue changing. But in terms to know that that's a plant that it's telling, I mean, we try to do our best. At first, I thought, oh, we can try to read the frequency of plants, and I know that there's all these sensors and like contact mics, and you can play them. But at the end of it, you're getting like some electrical impulses from a plant that a MIDI instrument will like give the sound for it. So you're still like giving another sound of that, which I thought it. I mean, I'm not so secure. I mean, it will be too synthesized for a plant, and maybe you can get all these rhythms, but then it's something that it's too predictable. I feel like when you get
Right.
just like the sound of a plant through the impulse of it.
Right.
But through doing meditations and getting in, you try to like studying a plant and its process and what it's for, and there's like hallucinogenic potentials and shamanic use and fever. Like let's say cinchona, this plant from the Andes in Central America, it's used to cure like big fevers. So sort of we digged into how you felt with a fever and how would be the sound of something trying to cure that fever and what do you need, what how that plant will help you to relieve your pain. They're different from floripondio, which is a psychedelic sort of white trumpet, which it takes you out of your system. It's another it's not going to relieve you, otherwise it's going to make you crazy and blind, and it's used for other things. So then you relate a plant to its like material, like the cinchona first. It's you use the outer part of the tree of how do you call the corteza,
The bark of the tree?
the bark. So we're talking about wood then. So
Right.
like what kind of wood sounds will help cinchona to relieve, and if it's like a more of a mothering aspect of it, you want some of a warmer sound will come from it. So
Mm.
it's sort of trying to understand the personality and the subtleness of each plant to know where what sound will give a better interpretation for each of them. And it's trust. I mean, I've got really inspired with Hilma af Klint. I don't know if you know that artist. She's
Mm-mm.
a abstract painter from the beginning of the 1900s, and she did all these paintings uh, where she received the information she wanted to paint. She needed to paint. She was like kind of channelizing all this
Mm.
information for painting, and Hilma, yeah, she painted. Somebody was telling her what to paint, and she, for many years, she had this group of five where they met to doing clairvoyance. I mean, like bringing spirits
Spirits. Yeah.
and drawing from the spirits. what they were telling them to draw. And I think from there I got this big curiosity of work in that sense, of like creating a relationship with plants and meditation and talking to the forest. And I feel we are totally being interfered, like influenced by nature too, if we want to. I've slept under a floripondio tree, which is this plant that brings you to deep, deep, deep dreams.
Wow.
And from there I could also like sort of bring out the subtleness of the sound that floripondio wants to do. It's like this trumpet sound, and the flower has the shape of a big trumpet. So it's like a combination, and I'm being like open to receive this information too, and trusting it. Like I'm not a scientist. I cannot like prove that this is, but I can prove that it makes sense at some point, and the sound makes sense too. I
Yeah,
don't
for
know if
sure.
that response well.
No, that was great, I think. And I loved hearing the descriptions of like you said, if you just, since you described those two, Cinchona, I think, and Floypondia, like the tapping into the personality, like you said, and the character. But it's also that like you said, you've spent time with these species and kind of being with them. You slept under Floypondia, and that's so interesting. That's really great. And what's I gonna say? I think of, yeah, I think at any time. So there was another question for me: how do I draw inspiration from non-musical elements and create music from it? So thinking about that in a more general way. But I think you nailed it. Just thinking of like, what is the narrative or the personality or the character of the non-musical element that I'm trying to channel into music, and then and just playing with how that would sound, whether it's if I'm choosing other sounds for it. Um yeah, like you said too, it's if I want a windier sound or a more abrasive sound, and tapping, thinking about relating that sound to the character. I don't know. I guess that's for me how I think of sort of drawing inspiration from non-musical elements. But I this um I mean, to also, it's just that your work and this project in particular, it sounds like it's very like research. I mean, like you said, you're not a scientist, but still the act of spending time with these plants and understanding how they've been used, and that in itself is part of the artistic process. Um, and you're probably doing so much of that even before it becomes sound, or and but also thinking about sound that whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like relating to the potential of its sound. As a musician, what we have is the ability to create sounds, or like, more than create. Pick on sounds that already exist. Through electronic music is more like electronic sounds through electricity, which are processed. And I feel electricity is involved in every aspect of our lives. We're all
Right.
electrical in this world. Plants are electric too. Electricity is in the air, like in everything. And so it's sort of connecting through electricity too, in order to get these things. It's like spores, like from mushrooms, like
Mhm.
spores in the forest. We
Sports.
breathe spores of things. We also breathing electricity somehow. We are electric, and that has something to do also. But we can
Yeah.
like try to nail down a sound for each thing. And I guess that's the main idea of Futuro Fossil, of like either going to the future or to the past of what the sounds that were fossilized or that existed somewhere before us, and that what what we can find from those sounds. Imagine the sound of a volcano exploding 5,000 years ago, but we can see in the lava of that volcano there's something, and that has a sound. I feel like it's fossilized subtly, but you
Hmm.
can describe it, and getting in touch with that. and also for the future, any sound that we are making today will somehow impact something and will stay and will appear in 5,000 years from now,
Mm.
or will change somehow the molecules of things that are around. And I feel like that's the power of sound, of how it can interfere and change molecules in our body, in our other things, in the way we move, and the way of constructions. I mean, sound is so powerful that it can break a glass, and from there on, I mean, with frequencies, you can bring a building down if you want to, or more than that. And how it affects, if you play music to plants, plants grow better, and and it's all like interconnecting. And sound has that potential of getting beyond the physical things we see. It can talk through things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Something you touched on that I think a lot of people don't think about as much, and maybe it's a little bit so that this idea of sound affecting our bodies, and a lot of and now I think in more recent years, there's a more of a conversation around noise pollution. I don't know in Chile if people
Mm.
talk about noise pollution, right? So all of the sounds around us, right? The construction sounds, all these man-made sounds, right? The sounds of industry and how those sounds are affecting our us as a society, affecting our environment, are disrupting the environment, or disrupting species. But yeah, and there's just so much there. I think that field. I don't know if I don't have a question or anything really. I'm just thinking about this because but like we said, like a certain frequency or a certain at a certain power, some sound could tear down a building. And that's the same with our bodies. Like I was actually about a month ago spending time with a friend of mine who moved to she lives in New York City, but she moved to the far Rockaways to Rockaway Beach, and she lives right next to the airport. And she said that the sound that the planes, so all the airplanes, are just coming in and out all the time
Mm.
where she lives, and it's New York, so it's a big airport, JFK, I think. And she was saying like she has been feeling so unwell since she moved to that place, and she thinks it's that, the airplanes create subsonic frequencies, but incredibly like loud and potent subsonic frequencies that really do affect our bodies, and I think can affect our brains, our cognitive functioning, our certain systems, maybe gastrointestinal functioning in ways that we really take for granted, that are really dangerous. And I think as musicians and as sound artists, this is something that we can draw attention to. I mean, even though I also like, I don't consider myself a scientist, but I understand that, frequency is molecules moving, I mean, sorry, sound, I should say, sound frequencies, and sound waves are create molecules that move through the air. And they are, even though we don't see sound, it is actually a physical, tangible thing. We don't always talk about it that way. And it's great. I don't know. I just went on a tangent about that because what you were saying reminded me, was making me think about that. And I hope it's something that more people become aware of. But it's such an area that can be researched so much further.
I think yeah, it's a big area to research, and how the potential we have as musicians to help or work, or what kind of molecules we want to change. Or it's politically very political in a way too, like as musicians, what are your political powers? Yeah, you can, with sound, you can work on like helping people out, or bring in new ideas, or this molecule aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna take this. So there's a few more questions sort of really related to your work. Someone asks, what is a fossilized sound and how do you listen to it and create music with it?
Okay, a fossilized sound would be a sound that's been like hold in time, and somehow you sort of scribe it, or like open something and it comes out. And I this is like a the inspiration coming from the desert. I grew up part of my childhood in the desert with my grandfather, who was an archaeologist and a paleontologist. So we will spend so many hours like looking for rocks of like fossilized shark teeth or shells or I don't know whales, and I always thought, what was the sound that existed here before? Like what was the sound these animals lived in, or the cracking of the ocean 80 million years ago, or if, like that's a fossilized sound. I feel like just like a time traveling to the sounds that existed in a certain era, but it's like as paleontologists, I mean, they work with the material of things, sound going again like molecules, where how that sound affected these molecules too. So it's working with that inspiration of the sounds that were before time and that
Hmm.
crystallized into the fossilization of things that we can dig in time. That's the origin of this idea. But now it's the question, what are we fossilizing today? Because if we have the possibility to affect the molecules of things around us with sound, what are we fossilizing today? And that comes again. What is going to stay for the future? What's the sounds that we're creating? How are going to affect everything around us? And how somebody in 10 million years from now will be able to read that sound or how it affected it? So
Right.
that's the idea of sound fossilization, how it affects the construction of materia around us.
Yeah, and someone else asks, and I think this is sounds to me like this is part of it too. Are you actively fossilizing sounds as a form of a future archive?
Yes. Feel
Yeah.
it has to do with a future archive, and I think working with synthesizers, and there's also this sort of nostalgia of the old school synthesizers, the first ones made electronic sounds of like, and it's like a collecting sounds of different machines, and sometimes you get stuck with one specific synth because of the quality of sound that comes through it. And
Right.
it has something to do with that, with the archive of sounds like that. And like with field sounds, it's not sometimes I've worked with it, but it's not like the biggest thing. I have collaborated with other field artists, sound artists, that they gave me sounds and then I used them in my compositions for things.
Hmm.
And it's also part of like, yeah, sounds that we record from our surroundings and how we make them music. I feel more of a musician in that sense, of like more, it's like I more than working with the sounds from nature or from other places. It's like creating music and the combination of these elements. And yeah,
Hmm.
I feel like I have a bigger potential as a composer in that sense, and I love doing it. And the melodies and like building up an atmosphere from the composition.
Yeah. Amazing. Someone else asks, and this is sort of we're going back a little bit, but what are the considerations around the sacredness of the magic plants in the process of composing the piece that you're working on?
Sacredness, it's very important, and that's why we're bringing these plants to subject, to make them sacred again, because they were totally used and overused, and today they are in extinction, some of them. So for
Mm.
getting to work with each of these plants, there's a whole aspect of respect, of permission, of being very
Mm.
humble. And that's why it's not me who I'm deciding through the plant. I feel like the plant is giving me the information that needs to be delivered through me. Yes, I'm using my senses. I mean, and sh- how do you say, I'm putting my body for this process, but I don't feel it's like about me. It's more about the plant, and this sacredness is using it as respect, and with a bigger purpose of putting the plant where it belongs to. and bringing them back to the place where the plants become, and if this can help to protect these plants and to have them, I don't know, respected again, and don't know overuse them.
Hmm.
And it's like respect the forest and respect everything related to them, and if that will help eventually to keep an area of not being cut down or not to, or I think part of the respect and sacredness has to do a lot with the health of us too. If we're we are asking a plant to heal us from something, one, let's heal them back, let's give them back to them. So it's this relationship of giving back and recognizing the origin of a plant, where it belongs to, what is used for originally, and recognizing the ancestors who discovered the use of this plant, because the plants existed, and for nature, maybe animals use it. I don't know. It's a long story of recognition and learning also.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's really important that you've brought that, you're bringing this narrative to light, not this narrative, the history that these plants, people talk about using these plants for, like you said, for medicine, for enlightenment. But what's happened is they're really exploited and appropriated in ways that are really that aren't appropriate, Um, and I think by also by bringing awareness to that, you are hopefully also you are, acknowledging that that plants in general are sacred, that our nature is sacred. And I love that what you said about that. If we're trying to get, since we always are always trying to get something healing from a plant, like what are we doing in return? And thinking about that relationship, because it's not a one-way relationship, it needs to be two-way. And I think that, yeah, causing art and can be so critical in bringing that shift in perspective. Yeah. Well, I wanted to, I was thinking too, I mean, you already mentioned a little bit about this, but you have lived in so many different places. So right now you live in Valdivia. You also spent a lot of time, you said, in the desert in the north of Chile. You spent 10 years in New York, you said. You've lived most of your life, I think, in Santiago. Maybe there's other places too, but I was wondering how your work over time, and you could talk about kind of in general or maybe a specific project, but sort of how those different geographies and considering your body and your mind and your perspectives in relation to all these different geographies has come out in your work.
It totally does. I mean, I started playing music in New York while living there. I'm playing noise and punk rock, and I mean, it was New York gives you that high score of activity and energy, and this I just felt like driven to play music. However, I had no music background or studies or anything, so using whatever elements I could use, which was my voice. By then, I started this first band, and then when I knew that music was the thing I wanted to do the most and I needed more time, I left New York also because I was getting too crazy of all the sound and loudness and the speed of life there. It was
Yeah.
not helping me to become a better artist at some point, and life was more about surviving than like creating, It was very
Mhm.
inspiring but also very consuming. So moving back to Chile, and then I felt like I went to all this process of learning about composition, music production with a band that we were together for 10 years with called Macaroni, which was, it started as an experimental electronic band, and it ended up being a pop music project. And we had so much amazing fun. And I felt like a lot of awesome dance and being part of a bigger community and of partying and playing in clubs and traveling and touring, which expanded our like it helped to build a community and be part of a community and grow up in a generation of fun and like exploring, exploring sounds, exploring people, meeting and learning. It's always a process of learning. But at some point, I felt my ears needed a change too, and
Mm,
I felt like as a vocalist, I was not like giving the best of me either. So it's like I was interested in subtleness and discovering other things in music, and it naturally I mean, we all moved to different cities, and we also all wanted to live in a different lifestyle. So the band itself naturally this we disjointed, but we can maybe play music again. I mean, we're up to joining back in 10 years because I felt that was the community we had, which was very important,
mhm,
and how music changes. I mean, yeah, since I've been living in more nature now, it's a different sound that I feel like processing. It's, the city, when living in the city, ask you for a harder sound and for stronger things. I mean, and your body also needs something that's more pounding and to keep up with the energy that a city requires. And I feel like now it's more about subtleness and how to not be disruptive into other things. And I feel that's what nature or the desert teaches me, like how to make music that can talk to the back and forth with that aspect of life where things are very subtle and also powerful. I mean, you work from other backgrounds too.
mhm,
I felt like part of this new process of life also started with two uh, close friends that passed away, that died,
mm,
and I know on one of them was a friend of mine, Anna, who we
mm,
did music together, and I mean, and we left projects that were unfinished, and so it has to do a lot of how to talk with the dead or how to still do music with her in this process of finishing recordings we had
mm,
work. And that's how Future Fossil started too, of how, like, the sounds that she left in her drum machines or things that we were working, that's like that was a fossilized
mm,
sound too, because she was not here anymore, but she left something. So I was sort of digging into that and continuing her musical presence with us, and also my grandfather passed away by around the same time. So there was like
mm.
a big jump into this new search in music and in a more spiritual way, or in getting in touch with other entities, and which has
Yeah.
been going through this happened like 4 years ago, and how this been developing through the years.
Mm. Wow, that gave me chills. That's really that, I mean, that idea too of continuing the collaboration with someone. That's, I'm really, I mean, I'm so sorry to hear that, that two very close people passed away, but I think it's also
It's
just so amazing that you had that perspective too, that you could kind of further this collaboration with somebody who is not here on this, in this form of the form that we're in. And yeah, yeah. Sorry, you were gonna say something.
I mean, life and death, it's okay to be
Yeah,
sorry about, but it's part of
yeah,
living, and what we're becoming.
yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Um, Someone asks, what kind of input do you get from other people about your work? Is it part of your process to get feedback from other musicians?
What kind of feedback I get?
And is it part of your process to incorporate feedback?
Yes, yes. I mean, sometimes I get feedback of. others collaborating. I mean, I love collaboration and being exposed to share with others. And I feel that's the nicest feedback you can get when somebody asks you, hey, let's collaborate on a piece or record something or have like a musical um, date. Like I love doing that. And I mean, we did it together, and I think something
Yeah,
beautiful came out of it.
so
And
cool. I know.
I
I wish
love
we
that.
could have done it more. I wish I'd stayed longer.
Yeah,
We could have done more. Anyway,
I
go
mean, we
on.
can still do it whenever
Yeah,
we meet again.
yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things to do, to share with people, the music experience of making it. And when playing live and giving it to others, I mean, you are making people go somewhere. And when people appreciate that, or they, I mean, really feel what you're trying to give them, and they come back to you and say thank you, or whatever the
Hmm.
aspects of that. I mean, that's a nice feedback of it. What I enjoy the most, and makes me continue wanting to do research, or just being able to create new spaces within sound. Spaces that doesn't visually exist, but they exist in time, and wanting to share that is keeps me wanting to work more and more. And
Yeah.
knowing, yeah, the possibilities that sound can have in creating new imaginaries or imagination spaces. Or I mean, it's very abstract, but we are abstract too.
Yeah. Yeah, sound is one of the most abstract realms, I think, in the arts. Because we can't touch it and we can't see it necessarily unless, if you're watching live performance, but then what you're watching is still like I always remind people that performance is also a visual art. But the sound itself is abstract. Um, But also, it's interesting because now I feel like we're coming around, like what I was talking about before, that sound is also, it is tangible and it does, like, when we were talking about it moving through the air, and noise as something that affects something else, which ties into how you treat sounds as fossils, acknowledging sound fossils and creating new sound fossils. And yeah, it's great. I think too, just to add to the feedback question, it's interesting because I think there's ways that sort of one could kind of interpret that question very literally, like, you can be asking people for feedback, but like what you said with collaboration, but also, when you are, and you said this, when you're playing live with other people, that process of feedback is happening all the time through listening, because when you're like when you're improvising with somebody, or even playing a composed piece with somebody, that feedback is happening because you're actively listening and responding to what other people are playing, and making sure you're playing, in that time with them, or manipulating the sound in some way. But that, I don't think, I don't know how I could, we can't really create in a complete vacuum, right? We can't create without some amount of feedback, I think, or some amount of exchange. Yeah.
Feedback keeps you going too, and feedback is like when you get an invitation to play in somewhere else with someone else, or participate in a mix, whatever. Like when
Hmm.
I feel like feedback, it's
Totally.
the motor that keeps you going on music, because I mean, I don't want to do music for myself. I mean, I have fun sometimes playing alone in my studio and playing piano, and just like I love it for myself. But I want to do music to get out there, and that's a performative aspect or the bigger sense of it. Like
Yeah.
and that's a feedback that keeps you moving. It's
Yeah. Did you feel like that was hard for you in the pandemic? Like when the pandemic started, did you already have projects going that were collaborative? I mean, I think, yeah, well, this project, it sounds like, it started before the pandemic. but I think a lot of people who, were very used to collaborating had a really hard time maintaining that in the pandemic. And of course, everybody had their own, levels of comfort of how much they were interacting. But how was that for you, kind of keeping up with staying connected during this last, 18 months?
On the one hand, um, I continue collaborating, but more of like from studio productions and doing music for video installations or for other aspects, not the live. Where and collaboration was more of like collaborating with other kind of artists, visual artists in this case, and also I felt for me was good to sort of take a step back of moving so much and playing live too much, and I loved it. It was a good time for observing other aspects of music and doing research or having time for other things, like it
Hmm.
didn't I love playing live, but it felt good not to do it. So I can appreciate and also feel the nostalgic about doing it, and I loved feeling how much I loved it when I was doing it before, So I want to come back now because at some point when you're like playing all the time, then you're like involved in this rhythm of like touring, moving, carrying your things, and meeting new people, and I love it. But and stopping and saying, wow, I missed this in my life. And then I will remember
Hmm.
it and I'll cry of like, this is so beautiful to do it. And I really want this to happen again. But it's good to stop and reset and get involved in other things and getting new material and getting new experiences. So
Definitely. It's so important. I think you and I have both had those experiences of being sort of on the road constantly, like you said, also, and not a lot of people bring this up, carrying your things, carrying your gear, setting up your gear every day, or whatever, getting on a plane with the gear, carrying the gear. I feel like being on tour is mostly just gear management.
gearing.
And then and then you're on stage for 1 hour. Like, but the rest of the day, the rest of the night, I'm like, what's happening with my gear? Um,
Well, now that
just an
you
aside.
mentioned like the stage part of it,
I
which is
Yeah,
everything makes sense just to be on stage at somehow, unless
yeah,
and meeting new people and all that. But I feel like the experience of playing live, it's like absolute present, being on the present in terms of
yeah,
the only way of performing, it's being there and nothing else can get in between,
yeah.
And that's something that I really miss, like because it's an experience and it's a practice that requires your entire being, your concentration in soul, energy, mind, delivering that. And yeah, that's like the most sort of hardest part, not to be practicing it, but it's gonna come back. I mean, patience. Things
Yeah.
come back and forth. But gearing, yeah.
I am really not looking forward to that part.
Oh, me
I've been,
too.
yeah.
I
But
mean, I
anyways,
want.
no, yeah, but on the other hand, I do miss what you were talking about, the feeling of being so present. But anyway, no, you were gonna say something. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I wonder. Like I've been questioning myself. Like I want to travel with the most little instruments as possible and
Yeah,
be like everything in a
yeah,
backpack. And like also I've been like sort of questioning that. How do I want to come back to this
totally.
aspect? Because I don't want to carry like three heavy cases every time going everywhere, and it's exhausting too. But it's beautiful but exhausting.
Definitely. Yeah, I have my first live show in 2 weeks or so. Oh gosh, so soon. Or 3 weeks, 3 weeks. Um, and this weekend I've been having this like, oh no, what gear am I gonna bring? And do I have the right cases? And I'm like, I just want to think about the music. But but it's like I'm almost like thinking about the gear first, which I don't like. And then that also is going to affect the music that I play. But I feel like this is a whole new, it opens another can of worms. But because I haven't been it hasn't been on my mind for so long, and so it feels like a really big and anxious uh, question. I don't know, a problem that I have to solve.
Well,
I'll figure it out.
resolve it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a hard
I'll
one.
figure it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, yeah. I'm having like computer issues and all of that stuff, so I'm trying to figure out if I can I do something without a computer if that, and then what gear am I going to bring with me? And, which, like you were saying, I don't want to bring the big synths, but like what little things can I bring? And my sitar, since I play sitar, is like,
Yeah. And
making sure I'm taking care of my sitar is always, important. But anyway, that's a whole other, opening another can of worms.
yeah, and I'm glad we're questioning all of it, but
Yeah, yeah. But I do think, Uh, I mean, the fact that I haven't, it's just all, for me, and maybe for you, I don't know for you too. I've been playing music since I was a small child, so I can't remember a time where I went for 18 months not having a performance, where I was in a space with other people, and I think with the live streams, I did a few live streams, but I just don't feel like you're so like the live streams when you're alone, it still doesn't, you don't have that experience of being so in your body and in the moment.
mm,
Um, Whereas when you're with people in a room, when the audience is there and there's a community and there's this energy and the sound is really big in the venue, also you feel the sound in your body in a way that I haven't heard that in so long. Um, and that's something I really miss. I think it really forces us to cognitively and like viscerally be so present. Um, and yeah, I am looking forward to that feeling. Yeah,
that's
personally.
yeah, the best feeling of music.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's a nice feedback. The biggest feedback
yeah,
from sound you get too.
yeah, yeah. Coming back to feedback, totally. It all just happening live. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, we should wrap it up, but there's one more question. Somebody asked, "What have you been listening to recently? What artists in your network inspire you?"
What art is in my network? Let me. I mean, I have this Fin del Mundo playlist I made lately that
Check it
goes
out.
from Anna Domino, which I love, but
Mm-hmm.
let me find. I have this band. I'm bad with names sometimes. Well, Tanger, Tanger?
Mm-hmm.
I love Tanger, and I think it's been a big inspiration lately.
Amazing.
And
Yeah, check out. So your Fin del Mundo playlist, is that on Spotify or somewhere? Or is
yeah,
it
and it's my Spotify. I'm trying to get the link so I can share it.
great? Great.
Let me get the link here and I can share it in the chat. Does the chat is for everyone or no?
I think
Answer.
if someone will copy and hopefully
Uh,
copy and paste it into
okay.
there's like a Facebook and a YouTube, I think. So
I think I
hopefully that will happen.
answer it with the link.
Yeah.
I hope that
And if
works.
not, you can look up, Dice says they'll share it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, and for me, I don't know. I think, I haven't made any playlists recently, but I just went to see a performance last night that was a collaboration between two Baltimore artists I really love. One is Infinity Knives, and the other is a group called Mind on Fire. And so, Infinity Knives is an experimental kind of R&B electronic music producer, and Mind on Fire is a new music chamber group, for lack of a better word, I think. And they arranged the album that Infinity Knives made that was originally electronic. They arranged it for a small orchestra and performed it live. And then so it was, live woodwinds and brass and strings and singers and piano and
Nice.
and a rapper, like multiple different singers for songs and a rapper, and it was such a cool show. So if anybody wants to check out Infinity Knives and Mind on Fire, those are two I
Mm.
was just uh, super excited about. I also actually, and then one last one that I just thought of when we were talking earlier about sound in nature and capturing sound of nature, but it's a totally different way of doing it. There is this sound artist and composer called IDM Theftable. I think it's IDM Theft a bowl or something. Um, and he's an improviser, experimental musician, and has an Instagram account that's really fantastic where he takes his tuba and other instruments and he
Mm-hmm.
puts the tuba in landscapes with a microphone in it and he records the landscape through the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Nice.
it's a really great way to engage with nature, and it's also the Instagram little posts are also very entertaining to just see an instrument among the landscape and capturing the sound through that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, Elisita, do you have any final thoughts or comments or questions?
Final. Nothing is final. Everything is in
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm glad to share and like explain, and it helps a lot to talk about these things because I feel, yeah, it makes you think about your artist practice more than just practicing it, you know. And thank you for the experience, and I would love to collaborate with you again to
I
share.
really think, yeah, we will.
And for dice, I feel it's a great instance for networking and to share experiences and have this things going up and again. And please send your feedback if you want to, or any aspects, any collaboration. I'm open to work with anyone who wants to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Can't wait. And I just want to just put a little plug. So today was the second of three artist talks that I am leading for facilitating, I should say, for Dice with Dice. And next weekend, so the same, we're doing it on Sunday, October 17th. I will be interviewing an artist called Bishi, and she is from London of Bengali heritage. So she's a British South Asian artist who is a singer, electronic rock sitarist, composer, producer, and performer. And she also has an album, I think, that's coming out this week. So we'll be talking a little bit about
Nice.
that. Yeah, and so that's a week from today, I think it's the same time. So it's 6 p.m., starting 6 p.m. in Berlin, 5 p.m. in London, and 12 noon on the east coast of the US. So just if you're out there, please tune in again.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Elisita, and I'm so glad to connect with you. And all for all of you too. We didn't really talk about it, but Elisita and I met a few years ago. I had a chance to go to Chile and got to stay with her, and we got to jam and play a show together, and it was magical. And I am so glad that we've had these opportunities to keep kind of connecting and
Let me share
um,
something
sharing
beautiful I have.
spores. The spores. I like the idea of
Spores.
the
Yes.
spores. Yeah.
I want to share hold on, the sound
Yeah.
the song we played live together.
Oh,
We can I have it on SoundCloud, so I can post it here. Let me get it. It's a beautiful song we played in this show in Matucana 100, and that was the first Futuro Fossil show.
that's right. I also saw maybe the last Macroni show, maybe.
And you saw the last one? Maybe.
It it was your record release show, but I remember you told me that that was sort of the beginning of the end. I don't know.
I can
You
find
might have
our
put
song. Let me see.
that was that couple weeks. It was that same t month that I went to that show.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't find our song.
We'll
I
share
think
it.
we'll
It's
share it
okay.
in the, yeah,
We'll
we'll
share it.
share
We'll
it.
find it and we'll share
Okay.
it.
Sorry for that. I
So
think
just
SoundCloud did
keep
this
in
thing
touch.
that if you don't pay for your account, it erases you some of your last songs. Sadly did that. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, thank you so much,
Okay.
Elisita. Yeah,
Thanks to
and thanks
you.
to thank you for coming, joining
Have
us.
fun, everybody in
Yeah,
Berlin. I hope to play there one day and
we
anywhere,
will.
everywhere, everywhere in the world. Anyone.
Yes.
Love sending love.
Yes. Take care, everybody. See you next time.
Have a nice Sunday. Bye bye.
Bye.